And that's such an important lesson that especially artists need to learn,
Right.
which is be adaptable. Leave yourself open. Understand that your ultimate goal is to be a storyteller.
Right.
And that might take many different forms. As long as you get to tell the story you want to tell, be open.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is a podcast on directing for anybody that's quite simply ever watched anything. Pete converses with a wide range of fellow directors, writers, actors, showrunners, producers, executives, and more on a journey to determine just what makes a good director and why we'll always need stories. The Director is Pete Chapman's digital studio, built on the pillars of craftsmanship that ensure a unique vision. I'm talking about story, innovation, perspective. Learn more about The Director, and better yet, get your official Director's Chair wear by visiting www.drctr.video. That's drctr.video.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman. Today, our guest is Keith Powell, and our episode title is Keith Powell on the Moment Oprah Saved His Job. And that is a very interesting conversation point that we get to in the middle of our interview. You are probably more familiar with Keith as an actor. He played Toofer on 30 Rock, but over the course of our talk, you'll come to find that he is another one of those complete storytellers who writes, directs, acts across theater, film, and television, and more. Keith and I met a few years back at a roundtable session of directors that had gone through the various directing programs toward episodic television directing. Probably turned into a bit of a gripe session, and afterward we were like, "Hey man, let's grab a drink, grab a burger, chop it up." And since then, he's become a friend, a confidant, very good person to have in your corner as a creative, and also just somebody who can cook. The brother can cook very, very well. Dinners at the Powells are legendary. So without any further ado, check out episode 9, and I will see you on the other side.
Roll sound. Speed.
The interview. Take 1.
So tell me about Greg Monroe.
So I'm assuming that you're referring to Law and Order when I first began. Greg Monroe. That was my very first job in television. It was weird because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I had to be on set with Vincent D'Onofrio all the time, who was terrifying.
How so?
Well, he demanded a lot out of his guest stars, and we were mostly directed by him.
There you go.
And I'm like 22, 23. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And then, but the thing that I really love about this, because I did 2 Law and Orders, in my first couple of years in television. Those were my first 2 jobs. It was Law and Order Criminal Intent and Law and Order the regular version.
I love how Law and Order regular now needs a name.
The regular.
It's like Law and Order Classic.
Yeah, exactly. The Law and Order OG was directed. Both episodes were directed by people who had profound impacts on my career. The Criminal Intent was directed by Don Scardino, who later was the producing director on 30 Rock. So I worked with Don Scardino, for all 7 years of 30 Rock, and he was a major influence on my crafting as a professional. And then the second Law and Order that I did, the OG version, was directed by Paris Barclay, who eventually became the DGA president, and then he's currently my mentor through the DGA. So both of these shows was kind of like this proving ground in New York City, you know?
Right. Yeah. If you haven't done one, you're not an actor. And you know, Dorian Missick mentioned that. Rob McElhenney mentioned that.
Yep.
In their interviews on the podcast. So
you know why? Just as an actor, actually also as a storyteller, as a director as well, there's so much exposition in Law and Order that you have to sell and make it not sound like exposition, that it really helps you as a storyteller if you know how to move it forward without feeling stale or stagnant.
Right.
And I think that that's why Law and Order proves such a proving ground for everybody.
Right. It's kind of like, I wonder if it's kind of similar to Robert Altman doing 100 episodes of Gunsmoke, you know, to get that, to work that muscle and then say, you know, you don't have to record audio like this. You know, people can overlap. And that's the beauty of like mastering the craft.
But that's how you know, but that's what is it? The 10,000 hours. I mean, you know, that's
true.
You gotta have a play. You need an arena where you can fail over and over and over and over and over again in order for you to flourish. Right.
So you grew up. Tell me. And just to let folks know, we started recording this, and we started talking, and I had failed to record this. So now I just feel horrible that I'm retreading 4 or 5 questions with this brother. But
I love talking about myself.
Tell me about your. We were talking about how you grew up, and let's just go back through that because I think maybe the people should hear it. I heard it, but they might not.
So I was born in Philadelphia, and my mother is young. And so my mother was only 20 years older than me. So she was still like learning about herself when she had a kid. And so she followed a boyfriend or moved with a boyfriend to California. So we moved when I was like 2 or 3 years old to Monterey, California, Central California. And we lived there from when I was like 3 years old to I was 11. And in that time, the rest of my family moved to California to be with us. And my family consists of my mother, my grandmother, those were my parents, and my 2 aunts who were very close in age. My grandmother's 2 youngest children, they were 5 and 7 years older than me. So they were like my sisters. And so it was, you know, the 3 of us, and then my parents in the house. And we lived in California until the early 90s. And then we wanted to be closer to family on the East Coast. So we moved back to the East Coast, and we moved to Delaware. And I was in Delaware from, 11 to high school. And then from high school, I went to NYU.
And then after NYU, did you immediately, actually, no, let's come back to that later.
Sure.
So you were mentioning, or we were talking about like the byproduct of growing up around strong Black women and Black women, and how that kind of affects your creativity. Like how did that inform your art and your voice?
Well, that's the thing. Like I grew up with 4 women in my house, and all of them wanted to always remind me that they were strong Black women. So that was like drilled into my head from day one. And so I believe that it's kind of helped me as a storyteller be a little bit more sensitive in my storytelling, understanding nuances that growing up in a house with testosterone might not have noticed.
Right.
And so I feel like I know how to tell the story of, the person who can tell the story of a strong Black woman the best is a strong Black woman. Right. But I feel like I'm the closest to it after that, you know? But I think my family was really, really passionate about education and history and about Black history, because I think that Black people don't get enough of their history. A lot of our history was taken from us. And so history was so very important to our family. And that's how I became a storyteller, because I wanted to talk about Black history. Our family, my great grandfather, my grandmother's father, was the first Black principal of Delaware. He got his master's degree at Columbia, and education became a major component in his life because his grandfather was a man named Harmon Unthank, who
that's a great name.
Harmon Unthank. The Unthanks is my grandmother's family, the Unthanks. I don't thank you, I unthank you. Right. And and the Unthanks were given reparations. They were given 40 acres. Actually, they were given more than 40 acres.
Where were they? What state?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah, and it later became a big city that I now can't remember in North Carolina, and Harmon Unthank became a major civil rights leader, and his children became educated, and one of his children was a prominent doctor. One of his children was a prominent architect in Portland, Oregon. There's a park named after the Unthanks, right, because of that. And so history, holding on to that kind of history was so important to us that I had no choice but to kind of be a storyteller and tell stories. You know? Right.
It's so this is where you get into like the big debate about art and commerce and voice, because like what you're talking about is the importance of having an image or a symbol to try and replicate, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the images that are dumped onto our community, it's kind of no surprise that you have a certain kind of, I'll even call it, psychosis that kind of generates and swirls around within the community of what is accomplishment and what's my responsibility, and I am not a role model. And it's like, well, how where are you going to get with that if we just absolve ourselves from that responsibility?
It's frustrating in that way, and because I feel like so much has been put onto the Black community just because of the simple act of our history being taken from us. That not only is our history been taken from us, we've been forced into roles and boxes in society that don't allow us to grow or change or advance. And it is our individual fighting spirit that pushes through that, but that takes a toll. That push takes a toll. And so we have a great responsibility. We have to work twice as hard for half as much. And it's a great responsibility. It's a great burden. But it's something that kind of has always driven me. And I don't know, for some reason, and my wife is like this as well. I think it's so important for our race to be educated and to have a particular foundation of education so that we can even begin to compete.
Right. I feel like sports it's like my go-to analogy because it really represents the easiest way to to look at life. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like, I feel like education is synonymous with like understanding what the offense of the other team is trying to do to your defense. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if you don't understand a give and go scenario in basketball, be prepared to lose every fucking game. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, if you can't understand, like, that person needs to be given space because they're faster than you, but that one you can get up in their face because they're going to shoot and that's all they can do. Like, that's what the education is, learning how to maneuver and I some of these words sound negative, but I don't mean them negatively. Exploit. You know what I mean?
I see.
Because like I feel like even when I was raising money for my film, like part of like this superpower to raise $600,000 was like, they don't think I can do it.
They don't think you can do it.
They don't think I can do it. And so I'm here in these spaces and I'm doing what I'm doing, and y'all are probably like not even recognizing what's happening in front of your face.
Well, that's the thing where and I think that this is so important for artists in general, not just Black artists, but obviously especially Black artists, figuring out a way to do it on your own and not relying on other people to give you the hand up or to tell you that it's okay to do it. Figuring out how to kind of build your life and your career as an artist by yourself. Because, and this is something that I always preach to, I get mentees from NYU every year, and I always preach to my mentees, you have to figure out a way how to work in a business that needs you but does not want you.
Yeah.
And you need to remember that they need you. And this is the work. This is the life work.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, so I'm glad you said that. And this was, I look at every interview and I kind of say, what's the kind of theme of this interview? Right.
Right.
And I feel like this is a conversation about being prolific and being the multi-hyphenate on your own terms. And so obviously folks are going to know you as an actor for some, right? But you have directed theater, directed television, you're writing. I don't know what I can mention or not, so I'll just say you're writing. I
can go through all that, but yeah.
But so like let's talk about, first I want to get into, the first question is what do you see yourself as first and foremost? And then let's get into the journey from Greg Monroe to today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see myself as a storyteller. And I sit down, because I'm transitioning more into directing for television. I have a lot of meetings with, the studio heads and our, heads of current and things like that. And they always are a little confused as to what I am because I do so many things. I'm in 5 unions. I do. I've been hired, and for a time, my health insurance would jump from union to union to union per year based upon what I did the previous year. And what I did the previous year required the use of a different union. Do you know what I mean? And so, so
by that, you mean you're hopping around from Writers Guild to Directors Guild to Screen Actors Guild to, are you like a grip as well, or a Teamster?
No, I'm not a Teamster. But theater guilds, there's a Directors Guild for the theater, and there's a Directors Guild there's an Actors Guild for actors. Right. Actors Equity. And so those are my unions. And the answer that I always give is I'm a storyteller. And I'm not a director. I'm not an actor. I'm not a writer. I'm a storyteller. And there are stories that require me to direct it. There are stories that require me to write it. And there are stories that require me to be the vessel through which actors and directors need to be, and that's need to tell the story, and that's me as an actor. And it's never about what I can get a job in. It's never about what drives me today. It's always about what story am I telling, and am I telling this story in the best way using whatever particular skill that I have to help tell this story. So I don't know. I mean, what I like, and I've always, my entire career has always been following the story, and obviously following job opportunities, because that's important.
You got to get paid.
You got to get paid.
And so did that drive you because you created a theater, correct, in Delaware, and then you go to NYU yeah.
I went to NYU for directing, theater directing. I got my degree in theater directing. Mm-hmm. But while I was at NYU, I started getting hired as an actor in commercials. And so when I graduated from NYU, I was never not able to get a job outside of acting. Thank God, knock on wood.
Right.
My grandmother, who was one of my parents, got cancer. And so I left New York City. I was actually doing a play in DC, but I moved back to New York City to move out of New York City to go to Delaware to take care of her in the last 2 years of her life. And while I was there, I was bored and I was drinking a lot. And I on a night that I was bored and drinking, I saw that in downtown Wilmington, Delaware, there was a brand new theater that was sitting empty, and so I scheduled a meeting with the artistic the executive director of the building. It was a nonprofit, and said, "What the hell are you doing in that theater?" And he's like, "We just built it. We don't know yet." And I said, "Well, I'd like to put a theater company in there." And I was, 24 years old, so I was, I thought I could do anything.
Right.
and for the time that I was taking care of my grandmother, she passed away during this time, but for about a year, they gave me an office in that building for free. And I spent that year raising a couple $100,000 to do a first season. And we did a one play in that first season, and it was I didn't direct it, I just produced it, and it was a play starring the actress Lynn Redgrave. She won Oscars and shit and Tonys, and she was a huge star, a huge theater star who came and did my play when I was 24. And that really was my graduate school. I learned so much from Lynn. There wasn't a day that went by that she didn't call me a fucking genius and a fucking idiot, often in the same sentence.
Don't you love when they build you up and cut you down?
But Lynn Redgrave was my education. She came from a very prestigious acting family, the Redgraves. I mean, like they were, and watching her work was every bit of graduate school that I could ever have hoped for.
How so?
Because what Lynn taught me and what has stayed with me as an artist is that, first of all, actors are not interpretive artists, they're creative artists. And you're always putting yourself into your art. It's never about doing what other people have asked you to do, or doing what other people have required you to do, or saying they require you to do. It's answering whatever little voice inside of you that is congruent with the work. Mm-hmm. And that was a fucking powerful lesson to learn at 24.
Right.
You know? Right. And it's how Lynn embodied her entire artistic life. Every role that Lynn has ever played is a little bit of Lynn. Mm-hmm. And it's her finding her way into it. And that's what started guiding me as a storyteller. And
so when you graduate NYU, you were doing commercials while at NYU? And so what kind of was it? Let me transition into television, or like how did that even happen for you? It was always
like, for better or worse, my career has always kind of found me. I never found my career, and the only way that I can answer that, I would find my career, that I was an active participant in it, is an active participant in discovery of myself as an artist. So it was always learning and growing and changing as an artist, and then an opportunity would show itself. And so, right? And so it was, I did a Wendy's commercial because I did a fucking play at NYU that somebody found me in, where I really worked my ass off on that play. And a manager found me in that play and said, can I put you in commercials? I went and auditioned for maybe 300 commercials before I booked my first Wendy's commercial, but I booked it right as I was graduating NYU. And then Wendy's commercial allowed me to shoot a Starburst commercial, which allowed me to have enough money to not have a day job, which allowed me to quit.
How much does a commercial, like a national commercial like that, make somebody?
In the early 2000s, I think that I was a spokesperson for Starburst. So I think I made like $100,000 off of that in the early 2000s.
Just off a 30-second spot, or like
it was a number of spots. It was a campaign. Yeah. It was like commercials. It was commercials. It was radio spots.
Wow.
And so I was a kid and I had just graduated from school. I was still doing theater. I was doing theater plays, but it freed up my days to audition for things. And then my grandmother got sick, and I packed up from New York City and moved back to Delaware. And in Delaware, I started learning how to kind of do things for myself and on my own.
Right.
And then I was reborn in Delaware, doing Contemporary Stage, which was the name of the theater company that I ran. And that led me to directing plays for the theater that one of them was going to go on a national tour starring Keith David and Jasmine Guy. Keith David is the man. I love Keith David. I was 26 years old, and I directed Keith David, and it was an incredible experience. But anyway, from there, I was going to fire our set designer, and I had never fired anybody before. And I walked into the set designer's agent's office, and because this play with Keith David was going to go on a national tour that I had directed. And I was like, I wrote a "It's not you, it's me" letter. And I gave it to the agent, and that agent said, "Okay, great. So what are you doing right now?" And I was like, I'm about to direct this thing. I think I might move to Los Angeles. I was chasing a girl out in Los Angeles, and and then they're like, "Well, in the meantime, before you go to LA, can you audition for some stuff?" And I was like, "Sure." And I auditioned, and the first and only thing they sent me on was 30 Rock.
Wow.
And so I'm, the play that I was going to direct, it didn't materialize. Our funding fell through. And so I did 30 Rock for, 7 years. And then while I was at 30 Rock, I was always looking for opportunities to continue being a storyteller rather than just in many different ways rather than just being an actor. And I talked to the NBC executives and so I guess what I'm saying is my journey is never about, I'm going to pursue this. My journey has always been about how do I grow as an artist?
Right.
And as a storyteller. And then the opportunities presented themselves because I've now been placed in a position where I'm open to receive them.
That's interesting. I feel like we're like two different versions of the same approach, because I've always been, I am going to make this film. And it might take 7 years, but I'll make that joint.
I'm making this film.
And then the next thing is like, I'm going to make this next film. Yeah. And but along the way, kind of what you're talking about happens for me. Because it's like, okay, well, I this is taking forever, so let me, now I'm doing a commercial. Oh, okay, all right, let me build this company. Like, but it's a testament to like that responsiveness to the opportunities, and also like not thumbing your nose at shit that you didn't plan.
That's and that's such an important lesson that especially artists need to learn,
right.
which is be adaptable. Leave yourself open. Understand that your ultimate goal is to be a storyteller.
Right.
And that might take many different forms. As long as you get to tell the story you want to tell, be open.
Right. Yeah, and there's just principles and also, be a person.
Be a person. Go and have a life.
Yeah, be a person. Like, and also, don't burn bridges, and just
I might have burned a bridge or two.
Well, you know what? But keep your gasoline nearby, because sometimes, you do have to set a flame, something. So during that time, so from 06 to 13, you're on 30 Rock. Now, this was something I didn't know. The Judy's Got a Gun ABC pilot.
I did a pilot.
So how did that come? Yeah.
It came the first season of 30 Rock. I was hired as a recurring character and not as a series regular. They told me that they were going to hire me as a series regular, and then they hired me as a recurring character because a certain actor on our show asked for too much money. And so they didn't have any money in the budget to make me a series regular. So I was recurring. And in that time, I kept, and so I went back out and auditioned while I was recurring on 30 Rock. And I auditioned for a pilot, and I booked it. And they had to write me out of the last 3 episodes of 30 Rock in order for me to do it. And then...
did they willingly, because I know that's often a big negotiation. Like, did they willingly do that because they felt they had kind of messed you over with the false promise? Or can you even talk about that? That might be inside baseball.
I don't know if I can talk too much about that, but no, I mean, they weren't happy about it. And they understood because I had asked them over and over and over again, am I ever going to be a series regular? And they couldn't give me an answer. And so I have to go and follow this opportunity because,
Yeah, I ain't talking about nothing.
Right. And there was no commitment on their part for me. And they weren't happy about it, but they understood. And so I went to shoot the pilot. And then while we were waiting for the pilot to get picked up, and probably in hindsight, they might have known something that I didn't know. But while we were waiting, they called me and they said, we're willing to give you a series regular contract. And I was like, great, let's hear about what this pilot what happens with this pilot? And then, of course, like a week later, the pilot was passed on.
Right.
and so I went back to 30 Rock, and there was another major event that I can talk about that happened a year later, where there was still more difficult contract negotiations that were happening going into the third season, because the show wasn't exactly a hit, but it wasn't a bomb. It was clear that it was going to stay on the air for a little bit.
Right.
So there were major contract negotiations that were happening with the top players, and that squeezed more money out of the budget. And so they asked me if I could take a 50% pay cut.
For those listening, basically my hat just blew off my head. and after some wrangling and back and forth, I realized that I could not live in New York City for the amount of money that they were offering, and so, I passed, and so I quit the show for a second time. And I was depressed. I didn't leave my bed for a week. And I was like, oh, is this the wrong decision? Did I make the worst decision of my life? Because, 30 Rock was a true pleasure to work on. And the character of Twofer was advancing the stories that I'd like to tell in terms of educated Black people. So I was depressed for a week, and I didn't get out of bed. And then finally I got a call that they wanted to reopen negotiations, and they were willing to give me the things that I had asked for. And they closed on my deal within 2 hours. And I went, how the hell did that happen? What happened? Like, what just changed all of a sudden? I go to work a couple days later, and Tina Fey comes over to me, and she goes, "You'll never believe what happened." Because Tina always wanted me on the show. It was more of a contractual fight, with the muckety mucks, rather than the artistic team. And I said, well, what happened? And Tina said that Oprah Winfrey was going to do an episode of 30 Rock, and she hadn't read the script yet before she agreed to do it. And while she was sitting on her plane, she read the script, her plane to come to New York to do it. She read the script and got horribly offended because there was a character in blackface. And Oprah Winfrey called Tina Fey and said, I understand that there is a character on your show who calls people out on their racism. And if you include the character of Twofer, my character, in the scenes where the character appears in blackface, calling it out, then I will do your show. And NBC did a cost analysis, and they realized that they would lose more money losing Oprah than to just give me what I had asked for over the life of my contract. And so in the 2 hours that they closed my deal, Oprah was sitting on the tarmac going, am I doing this or not? Right.
That's why they closed my deal so quickly. And I came back to 30 Rock, and it never happened again. And Tina told me that I should say that on a talk show once. I should tell that story on a talk show once. That's why I'm like, I feel like I can say this.
Is this the first time you've shared that?
I think it's the first time I've ever shared this publicly.
Breaking news. Well, I take two things away from that. One, one's a statement, one's a question. The statement is, it sounds like Oprah flies private.
You think?
Waiting on the tarmac. And then two, have you guys had dinner and had have you thanked her for this?
I bet you Oprah wouldn't know who the hell I was if I passed her on the street. It's so funny because I was in the same room with Oprah once at like an Emmys or something. And I think I was dating Jill at the time, and my current wife, my wife at the time, but that was my current wife, but my girlfriend at the time. Currently, my wife, my girlfriend at the time. That's what I meant. And Jill was like, "Go and say something. Go and say something. Go and say something." I'm like, I can't.
Right, man. So during this time. And first off, kudos for standing your ground. And
thanks. It was just practicality. I just couldn't live off of that amount of money. Yeah.
Yeah, but look, I mean, a lot of people doing a lot of things they can't live off.
That's true.
I look at a lot of choices like, did that change your life? Or did it, make third quarter easier?
Right.
But so were you itching to get back in the director's chair during this period of network television, which also included Newsroom, At About a Boy, and obviously you still continue to act on TV, but like, was this like the time where you were like, man, I wish I was directing? Well,
while I was on 30 Rock, I made friends with many people at NBC, and many of them started championing me, and I'd say to them, I also direct, and that's what I got my degree in. And so when I got on About a Boy after 30 Rock, I was a recurring character on About a Boy.
Right.
And some executives at NBC had said to me, well, let's see if you can get an episode to direct of About a Boy. And so we tried to get me to direct an episode of About a Boy, but then the show got canceled. And
that's how it goes.
Yeah. And then I started shadowing on Superstore. Mm-hmm. And then I eventually directed an episode of Superstore. But it was my conversations with NBC saying, I'm also a director, and I believe that I believe that I have a unique point of view in terms of how to direct and how to tell stories, especially being on 30 Rock for 7 years. I think that I have something to offer in that, and trying to find ways for that to happen. And I then just got into the shadowing game. I've shadowed between 2012 and today. I've shadowed on 10, 11 shows.
Right.
And you just kind of hit the grind and let people know that you can do more than just act.
So what was the project that you were kind of like, man, I'm just going to do my own thing? Like what brought you?
I've made a short film a year for the past 10 or 11 years.
Man, that's dope.
And I always just need to make something. And so while I was on 30 Rock, I directed a number of short films. But when I got off of 30 Rock, it was important to me that I kind of establish my comedy voice.
Right.
So much of my life in my career up to that point in comedy was, doing Tina's voice. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, living in that world, but it was different than my voice.
Right.
And so I first of all, I wrote a movie, that was a drama that I starred in and was the lead producer on, and it was a feature film, and we raised the money and it played at festivals and got distribution and all that kind of stuff. And that was the first thing where I'm just like, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself because this is a story I want to tell.
Right.
And then
Can I ask what that was about? What was the premise?
It was a movie called My Name is David. The distributor changed the name to a much more interesting title. But the name of the movie was called My Name is David. The movie I shot was My Name is David. And
I love when they do that. I love when they do that.
And
thanks for helping me figure out this movie.
Right.
4 years later.
When I tell you what the name is, you'll see how helpful they were.
Okay.
And it was a movie about my character finding an abandoned baby on a subway and deciding to raise the baby as my own. It was a project that came about because the guy who was going to direct it, he and I were old NYU buddies, and we started having conversations about what we pass on to the next generation.
Right. And
so that's what became, and so, I devised the story, I co-wrote the script, and we made My Name is David, and then it was changed, the name was changed to Train Baby.
Ah, man. So now I understand what it's about.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember on one of my films, I was like doing a little vanity Google search. Hey, what's popping with Pete? And I saw that they had changed the poster to my film.
Yep, they did. They changed the posters to mine too.
But it was like a year later. It was like a year later, and it was like we had we would go through drafts, and typically when you get the next draft after a notes conversation, notes are implemented.
Yes.
Not shit is snuck in. And like I was like, yo, I gotta like look at this poster from like 19 angles to make sure I'm not overlooking something. And I remember it was a little detail. They had changed the watch on the character. And made it like not the watch that was in the photo that he wore in the film, but they made it more blingy. And I was like,
really?
I was like, is
was
this
a black person wearing that watch?
Yeah. And I was like, is this like a No Limit? Is this like circa, 2000 No Limit Records album cover? You know what I'm saying? But it got me so angry because like I'm expecting now to look for, it was subtle, you know what I mean? But it was like, you're telling people something about this movie that's not true.
That's not true. Well, I mean, I guess the poster for us, they changed the poster. It's a photo of me that I never knew existed. Holding a baby I've never held in my life. And I was like, that's what y'all chose? That's what y'all chose?
So does that drive... Yeah, go ahead.
Just to end it, from there, the story, my voice in comedy became a web series that I created called Keith Broke His Leg. And that was my journey after 30 Rock in terms of getting my work out there, and I had to do it myself.
And that was 2014?
Yeah, something like that. 2014, 2015. Yeah.
What's up, y'all? This is Romany Malco, and you are listening to Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman.
How to Succeed as a Creative Professional is Pete Chapman's upcoming book about his journey as a director. What started in 1993 has been a marathon full of persistence and creative pivots, transitioning from indie filmmaker to teaching at NYU's acclaimed film school, to running a production company, to directing television and commercials, and ultimately eyeing a return to the feature films that gave him his start. A mixture of how-to, self-help, and inspiration, this book will be for any person eyeing a successful career in a creative art. How to Succeed as a Creative Professional is coming soon.
Okay. I'm going to loop this back to what you said about Lynn Redgrave,
Okay.
because you got a vital lesson of how you are a creator as an actor from your experience with her. But then you go and do TV, which in some arenas may want you to kind of be a wood peg,
Right.
a square wood peg in a square wood hole, right?
Be a part of the machine.
Be a part of the machine. So when you were making Keith Broke His Leg and the films per year for the last 10 years, was that your opportunity to return to this advice that Lynn Redgrave had given you?
Yes. I mean, that's the thing where I believe, even in television directing, even when you are a part of the machine, that the only way to to thrive is to figure out your way into that, and for me, I always need a reconnection to who I am, what stories I want to tell, how I want to tell them, and why I want to tell them. And I always need a little bit of a reboot. So that's why I always kind of do these projects on my own, so that it helps me reconnect with my inner voice and who I am as an artist and what I can offer. And that informs me in the work that I do as a professional in the television industry or the film industry.
Right.
And I will tell you that I didn't start booking work until I realized that it's not about what they want you to do. It's about what you can do for them. Does that make sense? It's not looking to them to say, what can you do for me? It's looking to me and going, this is what I can offer.
Right. Well, that's a spot on. This is a straight up 100 podcast. That's been the thing that I've been working on, because, you come into the industry and the people know you for the thing that you've done. Well, they know you for the thing that they've acknowledged first.
Exactly.
So as far as it kind of goes, I've found that I'm just viewed as a guy who does episodic television, because all of the feature films in the production company exist in like this bubble that the tentacles of the industry were not in. And so now I've noticed, like, in transitioning to like pilot meetings and all those things, it's like, here's what I can do to help you execute this vision that's very personal to you.
Exactly.
And it's just a little bit of a pivot in thinking, right?
And that's all it is. It's just a small pivot in thinking. It's never, as a director, I believe that directors are storytellers, right? My little artsy view of directors, writers, actors the writers are the ones that create the world. The directors are the ones that interpret the world, and the actors are the vessels through which the world is told. And I believe that if I am just putting on one of the hats, that I really need to honor that particular hat. And so that hat is a director, is to tell the story that the writer has created, right? It's to interpret that story. And I think that it's just a small pivot in where in meetings about directing someone else's words, I say something like, well, what you did here really resonates with me because of this thing in my life and what I can do. And what story I think you're trying to tell is X, Y, and Z. And that's why it's so impersonal to me, and why, so it's bridging the two things. Right. And it's not about what can I do? I need to just turn the camera on so that your words can be heard. It's how can I bridge us and make it so that the full story is told, and it's ultimately the writer's story.
Right. But what's great about that is that you're also making yourself inextricable from the success of the project, because I understand what you're doing.
Exactly.
I have a personal journey that makes me a bigger value add than the director who doesn't.
Right.
And in partnership, this thing you've been working on for so long gets elevated.
Exactly. And especially in television, the writer is king, right? And so then that begs the question, then why the hell is the director there? And I believe that the director is there to help tell the story that the writer has created in its purest most emotional way possible, right? It's to make it's becomes a living, breathing thing. I've being both in the Writers Guild and in the Directors Guild, and being on the Committee of Black Writers and the steering committee of the Black directors. I see that the writers spend so much time agonizing over things because it's about figuring out what story they want to tell. And directors spend a lot of time just executing. Right. Because they need to breathe life into that story. My ears are getting big, so my earphones are falling off.
No, that's spot on. I have, I think also the fact that you are a storyteller and have your hands in so many different parts of the assembly line of creativity, if we can call it that, that it allows you to bring something extra to the individual hats you might wear. Because people talk a lot about, like it's just a television. It's just like your creative traffic cop. And I'm like, I've watched shows that I've directed, like whatever this sound, I don't mean to sound like this, but like I've watched my episode and then I watch like one later and be like, that one, and even your family would be like, that wasn't that good.
Right.
So there's something that is happening that you are doing when you sit in that chair. Now,
that's very true.
It'll be finished. It'll air. You know what I'm saying? But like, there's a difference between like what you're talking about is the difference between somebody saying like, man, that was good, or just kind of not identifying why it was off a little bit.
Yeah. And that's the thing where, because television is such a machine, and I think that there's beauty in the machine, frankly. I think, but because television is such a machine, it's very important, especially as a director, to find the humanity in it. And because that's ultimately what the writers are looking for, right? The writers are searching for the thing that's human, the story that's human and that connects. And it's the director's job to honor that and to make it human. And this is the conversations that I have with so many people where and executives in television where I feel like we're all trying to in comedies, we're trying to find the pathos, and in dramas, we're trying to find the levity. Right? And that's how we get to human.
Right.
And a director absolutely is the person that should be that instrument in that process.
Right. Here's a question, and I don't learn my lesson. I keep asking these, like, what's the best questions to see if somebody will ever answer them. But but like, what's the best note you were ever given as an actor? And what's the best direction you've given an actor? And I'll give you an example. I was listening to Don Cheadle talk about Boogie Nights. And that moment where he's got that like crazy like costume on and he's just sitting there and in the chair. And he said after like the first take, Paul Thomas Anderson was like, nah, man, that's not it. Like, I would just don't think about anything. I just want you to don't think about anything. And then, right? And then, so the next take, he's like, just sitting there like, what the fuck does that mean? And then he was like, Paul Thomas Anderson was like, perfect. And he was like, you look like a guy thinking about nothing because, because you're wondering what was that direction. And he was like, oh, you Jedi.
Oh man, that's good. That's a good story.
So, is there, what would that be for you?
What was the best? I can't think at the moment what the best note I've ever received as an actor was. So let me get back to that. But an early note that I gave to another actor that has stuck with me. It was during when I was directing Keith David and Jasmine Guy in this play. And Jasmine was having a very difficult time memorizing it was a two-character play, so there was just a lot of text that both of them had to memorize. And Jasmine was having a particularly hard time memorizing one particular paragraph in a speech she had to give. And every time we got to in rehearsal, she'd fumble and it would be really rough. And there was a lot of, she had to really fight for it. And then finally she was getting so frustrated. She came to me and she said, Keith, there's this line in this monologue that trips me up, this sentence that trips me up. Can I just cut it? If I cut it, I'll know this monologue like that. It's that one line trips me up. And I said, no. No, what I said to her was, Jasmine, I want you to go away tonight and figure out why the playwright put that line, that one sentence into the play. And come back to me and explain why that one sentence is there. And if you can't figure out why, then we'll cut it. But I have a feeling that sentence is in there for a reason. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, fine. She went away and she came back and she said, oh my God, I know this whole thing now. It's like, well, what happened? And she said, well, first of all, there was I learned the line wrong. So I learned this particular sentence where it's like a you instead of a me or whatever it was, like a little word, a little article.
Right.
And she goes, and it's interesting because that one sentence now tells me about the entire character that I had been overlooking. And I did nothing but just say, you can cut it. You can cut it if you tell me why.
Right.
But it was a lesson to me, and it was a lesson to me as an actor, and a lesson to me as a director, and a lesson to me as a writer, that everything is there for a reason. And you can't just like willy-nilly go past it.
Right.
You have to explore it, and you have to figure out why it's there.
Right. I have come across some lines that don't seem to have been there for a reason on a show or two.
Me too.
But
you know what though? But it's one of those things where, and we're a good director, will stop and go, why is this line here? Mm-hmm. And then a good director should be able to offer an alternative, a way to.
Right.
You can't just say, fix it.
Right.
Right. You have to be able to offer a path forward, but you got to know why it's there. And if it was there because they had a fucking deadline and they had their showrunner breathing down their neck and it's just got dashed off, then you can go, yeah, let's cut it.
Right. Right. But we gotta identify.
Gotta know why.
You gotta be honest. So what's where are you now, man? What are you working on? Like, what's the what prolific hat are you wearing most as we manage the pandemic and quarantine?
Oddly enough, I'm wearing all three hats currently in the pandemic. I have three projects that I'm currently kind of submerged in. It takes up all of my days during the week. On the acting front, my wife and I got cast in a show that will require us. It's a network show. It will require us to kind of shoot in our home during the pandemic, and that's kind of the joke. That's kind of the characters. So that'll last us until October. On the directing front, I'm prepping a movie that my first feature that I also wrote. It's a movie called Buffalo with a team at Vanishing Angle, which Vanishing Angle is a production company. They've had, I think, 4 or 5 movies in a row at Sundance every year. They are the most amazing group of indie filmmakers and lovely people to work with. It's a feature film that we are putting a cast together for right now that talks about the history of the Buffalo Soldiers and their clash with the Native Americans during the Indian Wars. It's a modern story, but it harkens back to that, and it's a thriller.
That's great.
Yeah, and directing it, doing these pre-meetings and putting all the people together and having these prep meetings for it is just it's feeding my soul really as a director. It's engaging my head, and whereas acting engages my heart. And then as a writer, I'm writing a movie. I got hired to write a film for HBO Films that I can't tell the details of, but it again is about Black history, which is obviously something really important to me, and it's about prison reform, and which I think is a conversation that we desperately need in this country. And I was late last year, I went into the room at HBO Films and I pitched this story, and they bought it in the room, and I've been hard at work hammering away on that screenplay that I would only write. I would not direct. So
got it. All right. Well, you've been busy, brother. Here's the lightning round, so you can get back to work.
Let's do it.
Now, this is something I'll give you. You can, whether you have 1 or 3 max for each of these questions. This first question, what would you recommend our audience binge for good acting and then for good writing?
I think that if no one has ever seen Mad Men, it's one of the best written shows ever. Sopranos is also, but I think Mad Men is more Chekhovian, and I like Chekhov.
Okay.
So Mad Men, I would say. And then for acting, well, my wife and I just binged The Great on Hulu. Okay. And I just think the performances in that show are just
Helen Mirren, Catherine the Great?
No. It's a comedy.
Oh, wow. Totally off.
Yeah, no. It's a comedy about Catherine the Great. in Russia, and it's got Elle Fanning and Nicholas Hoult in it.
Okay.
And it starts off really crude and weird and frankly dumb, but just over the episodes, it builds into such beautiful performances. By the last episode, it was there. Everybody is just breathtaking in it.
You know, I should, in considering your multi-hyphenate lifestyle here, what should people binge for directing?
I think Breaking Bad is one of the best directed shows I've ever seen. No, The Sopranos.
Okay.
It's a study in directing.
Dope. I co-sign all of these answers. Not that y'all need that, but just gotta put it out there.
Can I say a feature film that people should watch?
Yeah.
I think one of, if not the only perfect film, and one of the most perfect films ever is The Silence of the Lambs. That is a master class in directing.
Jonathan Demme.
Yep.
Rest in peace.
Yep.
What 3 traits do you think someone needs to make it in this industry?
Stick-to-itiveness. So fortitude is, I guess, the better word for that. Open-mindedness. Passion.
All right. Fortitude, open-mindedness, passion. And the listeners should also know you should be able to be a chef because Keith Powell can cook some food, y'all.
I love cooking.
Well, thank you for joining us, man. I really appreciate it. Always good to rap with you.
Brother, it is such a pleasure. It's such an honor. I think it's you. I admire you as an artist, and I'm so glad that the world is now really, we didn't say this when it was recorded, but I think the world is now in the Get Me Pete Chapman place, and I appreciate that, and I'm glad for that.
I appreciate that too, man. And, but also, I know we talked about some stuff before, but we got to figure out some collabos, man.
I love it.
And, are you, the last short film that you shared with me, are you sharing that? Is there anything you want me to direct people toward, or that we can direct people toward so they can see more of your work?
I directed a short film called Sophie's Quinceañera. If you go to my Vimeo page, there's a bunch of work on there that I really love. A deeply personal one is a short film called Sophie's Quinceañera. That played a lot of really lovely, wonderful festivals, and it just ended. And I want people to see that. It's dark as fuck, violent, and it's funny sometimes. But it's a microcosm of where I was emotionally, and I'm very proud of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Man. All right. Take care.
What's up, people? This is Pete Chapman. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter via @PeteChapman. Follow the pod on Facebook on our Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman official page, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or donations if you're feeling like it via letsshootwithpetechapman@gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name CHATMON. That was Keith Powell. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. We don't have any mail in the mailbag. I don't know why folks are not taking advantage of that, because we'll answer within reason any question that you have. But to get ahead of that, next week I'm going to bring you guys a special episode, which will be me providing my 10 commandments for episodic television directing. So you're going to walk away from episode 10 with 10 undeniable things that you can put into practice as you continue your journey as an episodic director, or step into your journey as an episodic director. And overwhelmingly, it'll be things that can apply to whatever you're doing, because directing, to some extent, is directing. It's more of the psychological things that you have to be prepared for in the different spaces, from film to TV to branded to commercials to music videos or whatever it might be. So that'll be me. I'll probably bring a couple special guests on with me. Stay tuned for that. You'll find out when you tune in next week. And as always, thank you to my producer, Tristan Nash, my assistant producer, Jada George, and my announcer here, Kelly McCreary. And until we catch you the next time, stay safe, stay blessed, and spread love.